guys, it's your girl Aisha, aka geekxxchic, and I am here with a review of the first 3 episodes of Black Lightning. So, as you guys know, my reactions have not been here for Black Lightning so far this season, and it's not because I've forgotten or because I've given up. I was actually on vacation and I was not here, so I was not doing any reactions. So all my reactions, unfortunately, are behind by a few weeks. And I'm sorry about that, but just recording while I was gone was not feasible. And I just figured that instead of me trying to rush out 3 reaction videos, you know, back to back, along with the fact that I have other shows that I'm reacting to, I just decided I was going to do reviews for the first 3 episodes of Black Lightning, and I will start reacting when, you know, to be up to date for episode 4 going forward. I'll post my reactions for that. But for now, as I mentioned, since I am 3 weeks behind already, I'm just going to do some reviews on the episodes, which I watched. I kind of binged them when I got back from vacation, and just kind of let you know what my thoughts are about the season so far. And yeah, just kind of to get back on track without necessarily falling too far behind, if that makes sense. So thank you for bearing with me. And why don't we get into the first 3 episodes? Since I'm kind of amalgamating all 3 of them, I'm just going to talk overall about what I've seen with the storyline so far and a little bit about the characters in the story that have been kind of touched on since the season premiere. And I want to just start off by saying that the season premiere was great. The season premiere was so good. And I've said this so many times when I talk about different television shows, like I'm talking about it with The Gifted right now because they, like Black Lightning, are going into their sophomore season. This can be a season that can just make or break a show. Like a lot of shows out there, sadly, they start off super strong in their first season, and then in the second season things don't necessarily go as well, and sometimes they lose audiences, or it just changes overall in a way that doesn't necessarily help the show. But I feel like Black Lightning has definitely not fallen into that so far. They're still keeping the things that make Black Lightning the great show that it is, as far as the hard-hitting action and the social awareness type of conversations, but it's still keeping the storylines moving along, and we're seeing some development with our characters. And we're actually starting out the season with a little bit of adversarial stuff right off the bat for our main protagonists, and that's pretty cool to see. Like, I've noticed that the first 3 episodes have the premise, and you remember last season there was, not always, but there was sometimes this premise of the book of this, the book of that, and so far, season 2, it's been the book of consequences. And that's exactly what we're seeing right now with Jefferson and the Pierce family. They're feeling the repercussions, the consequences, as Lynn brought out in the first episode, of all the things that went down in season 1. And we jumped into this season basically what looked like maybe a few days or weeks after the occurrences of the season finale, but it felt like a lot of stuff had happened in those few weeks that we missed out on. But the gist of it, obviously, is that Jefferson's life as Jefferson Pierce has finally been affected by Black Lightning in a way that it never has before. Like in the past, when he was Black Lightning, he wasn't a principal. He didn't have the responsibility of caring for an entire school and its well-being on his shoulders. It was like over 10 years before. I think he was probably still but he was a teacher at that point, and he probably could much more easily excuse not being in a certain place at a certain time when you're a teacher versus when you're actually responsible for a school and have the position of being a school leader. And we're seeing this season that Jefferson's finally feeling the negative side of vigilantism, and he's not the first character to go through this. We've seen it happen with Clark Kent. We've seen it happen with Bruce Wayne. We've seen it happen with Barry Allen. Just in the DC universe, the Marvel universe has tons of examples as well, but DC has always been pretty famous about the whole idea of the double life of the vigilante or the superhero, you know, trying to be mild-mannered, you know, regular Joes during the day, and then of course having this complete different vigilante lifestyle at night. So in this case, Black Lightning's finally bled over into Jefferson Pierce's life, in the sense of, with the attack of Painkiller and Tobias on the school last season, Jefferson was notably nowhere to be found. And in a case where a school is going through any kind of an emergency, the people in authority, aka the principal, vice principal, they're kind of expected to be there to provide guidance and a sense of safety to the students. And obviously, as an audience, we know that Jefferson was taking care of the problem, but it didn't, you know, with everyone not knowing that he is Black Lightning, it looked like he basically was MIA during a very crucial time in his school. And as was brought out by that very militant school board member, it was kind of the last straw in a string of really shady events that had happened, not only at the high school, but just in their community. And of course, Jefferson had no real defense that he could give without giving up the fact that he was Black Lightning, so it pushed him in a corner. Unfortunately, he just could not talk his way out of with lies anymore. And so in order to keep the school open, he had to give up his job as a principal, which clearly we know means so much to Jefferson. It means so much to him, and not just as a paycheck, but we saw in season 1 how the impact he's making on these children and the message that he's trying to bring forth in the school is really what's so important to him outside of the actual teaching part of it. And to have to step back from that, to take away that potential example of what you can be and what you can do with your life is in the position that he was in, was a real blow to Jefferson's, not just his ego, but his heart, you know, his heart and soul that he's put into this school. So I feel like this season we're going to see, at least in the first half of it, we're really going to see Jefferson's life be dismantled in all the ways that he's valued and maybe even taken a little bit for granted up until this point. Especially as we're going to see a little bit of this going on with Jefferson and Tobias. Like in season 1, Jefferson was this pillar of the community. Everyone looked up to him. He had the neighborhood, you know, behind him and people on, you know, backing him, and Black Lightning as well. And Tobias, because everyone had to believe he was dead, was living, you know, scrounging around in darkness, taking orders from Lady Eve and the ASA. He didn't even realize inadvertently. He didn't really have any power outside of his physical power. And now this season, I think we're going to see a little shift go like this as far as how it's going to feel that their positions are going. We've got Jefferson, who already, we had him arrested last season, right? That was one blow that definitely came after his image, but now him stepping down as a principal, losing the job. And then Black Lightning, I'm sure, is next as far as potentially getting a bad rap, but we're seeing he's going to lose his job here. We saw his friendship with Chief Henderson, has been damaged because of all the lies, with Chief Henderson figuring out that he's Black Lightning, and of course just continuing to have to lie. I mean, even see within his family. Like episode 1 in particular really showed how this obsession that Jefferson has with taking Tobias down, but also the emergence of Anissa and Jenny's powers are kind of just throwing his family into a chaotic place that has never been before. We saw, like, you know, Jefferson and Lynn are at odds about how to handle the superpowers and how to handle the ASA and these pod kids. We see that Jefferson's at odds with Jen because Jen wants to just make all of her powers go away and doesn't want to accept what she is. And Anissa wants to go out there and just do everything and have no regard to the code or the ethics that Jefferson has established as a vigilante. And even within the kids, you know, Anissa is all like gung-ho about her powers and, you know, it's a gift from God, let's go with it. And Jen's like, no, I want it to all go away. We're freaks, I don't like it. So the household, Pierce, is not in a really stable place at the moment. The love is definitely still there, but everywhere else, people are kind of not seeing eye to eye. So Jefferson doesn't really have that kind of stability and home that he once enjoyed. And so I feel like the next blow is going to be Black Lightning, because right now Black Lightning's kind of the one thing in his life that's still kind of going well. And I don't know how, but I feel like Tobias is going to orchestrate a way to start turning the community against Black Lightning, because that would kind of be the final peg in taking apart Jefferson's life at kind of a fundamental level. And while all this is happening with Jefferson, we're seeing Tobias. First off, we see him, he goes and visits, first he loses cyanide, which even though it wasn't something that he planned on having happen, I think in the end it actually worked out for him, because cyanide is kind of a tie to a life that that Tobias doesn't really have anymore. Then we see him, he kills one of his old friends who was there the day that he murdered Jefferson's father, the last living witness to this crime other than Jefferson, kills him, which at first seemed a bit like, why would you kill a man? Like, he was in a wheelchair, he was obviously in the sunset of his life, he didn't really pose the threat. He didn't look like he had any desire of rolling on Tobias, who I'm sure was probably bankrolling him living the life that he was in his home. But he kills him, and then he kills the last dirty cop that was on his payroll. After getting evidence, which we haven't seen yet, he kills him and destroys the evidence. So then he lets himself get arrested. And I say let himself because Tobias, if he's managed to elude a police capture for the past 30 years, he absolutely did not just get caught by the cops all of a sudden. He wanted to be arrested. He wanted to be where he was when he was to be caught. And my prediction and my guess is that he wants to get himself absolved of the crime of killing Jefferson's father, because now that I'm fairly certain that evidence that he received was all the evidence that they have for tying him potentially to that murder, and now that he's killed the last living witness, the only person who can say that Tobias did this will be Jefferson, who is an 11-year-old boy. And of course, it's going to become a thing where he said, she said, right? A jury's going to have to decide who they believe more, Jefferson's word or Tobias, who clearly has probably thought about this for years, about how he was going to absolve himself of this crime. Because the reality is, once Tobias gets this charge out of his life, if he gets absolved from this charge, he can go back into mainstream society again. He can start to become a legitimate businessman again. And that is all part of his plan. We saw him in season 1 talking about how frustrating he was for him not to be able to take the next steps in his life and his business because he had to be dead. So if he gets rid of this murder rap, that's basically the one bar that he had in his life stopping him from accomplishing his goals as a legit businessman, at least on paper. But this new business coming into town, we heard about a bunch of buildings being built, bought out in the town. I can't remember the name of their city right now. And that these developers, you know, to build a brand new project development in a place where everyone's kind of low income and probably won't be able to benefit from it. As we heard from Gamby, it's money laundering. It's most likely a front. So for money laundering, I have no doubt Tobias has got his hands all over this. And once he absolves himself of this murder charge, he's going to take over and start trafficking his guns and everything else. And then if he ever figures out how to use what's in that suitcase, which hopefully we'll figure out what that is fairly soon, he's going to also have his own personal army of super soldiers to potentially either sell the way that Proctor was planning to do last season, or just use as an army to protect himself going forward. So Tobias is setting himself up for a rise right now, while Jefferson is seeing a lot of his life kind of fall away and kind of feel like he's sinking. So I feel like the first half of the season we're going to see a little bit of this, and then in the second half of the season we're going to see Team Pierce have to kind of regroup, reset, and reform everything, and have to come back harder than ever to take Tobias down. And again, Tobias is such a massive villain in this series that I don't feel like we're going to take him out completely, but we obviously have to get to some place where Tobias is foiled in some way, if not in stopping the laundering business, maybe figuring out a way to stop him from creating more of these super soldiers. This chemist, the chemist that was hired by the ASA, this crazy lady, I feel like she's going to end up on Tobias's payroll. I think the fact that she's kind of crazy and she's a convict and she has no access to her child, somehow Tobias is going to find out about her and work something to get her working for him to figure out that missing, because that's the one thing, whatever's in that case, my belief system is that it's the formula for what they're using as green light that's probably complete, with the one exception of that one missing piece that keeps them stable, right? Because that's the reason why Proctor was so obsessed with getting Jefferson last season, was because he's like, he is an example of the vaccine gone right, and we need that to figure out what we're missing. So I feel like that's what Tobias has, and he's going to want to get that chemist to help him figure out how to complete this last piece of the puzzle to get what he wants, and potentially, as I said, either sell this serum or use it for himself. Other than that, we don't have a lot going on with Jen and Anissa at this point. Anissa, of course, doing her whole Robin Hood routine, which is clearly going to blow up in her face at some point, because someone's going to figure out that she's Thunder at some point. And it's going to really make things difficult, and I think that might be part of that descent of the Pierce family that we're going to see this season, is when people figure out that she's been robbing gangsters to pay for these the lawsuit against the government to get these pod kids released. Also, her kind of figuring out the kind of superhero she wants to be. Jefferson's clearly trying to mold her into the kind of superhero that he is, but Anissa's her own person. So she may not want to do things exactly like Jefferson, but at the same time, she's a little bit arrogant right now. She's a little bit foolhardy, and she needs to kind of take a step back and recognize that her father's been doing this for longer than she's been alive. So he might have some very valuable advice that she needs to be taking as far as how to deal with this in her life going forward, especially if she wants to have relationships and connections in her life, which will inevitably be touched by this other life that she's choosing to live. And on Jen's side, completely understandable that she's still just not ready to handle these powers, which seem to be accelerating at a crazy rate. We saw that the Nisa, she had to practice getting her powers up to snuff, figuring out how to harden her body and how to, get herself denser for like strength or whatever the case may be. Like, she had to do a lot of practice to kind of get it in check. Jen is just like, we see her emanating all kinds of sparkles. She's levitating already. She's creating an energy field. Like, she's not even doing this on purpose. So like, I feel like Jen is going to be crazy. Like, I feel like she might actually end up being the most powerful out of the three of them as far as powers when she finally does figure out how to harness it all. But I can understand her fear around the social ramifications of having powers, also around just her desire to not be this person. Like, she isn't Anissa. She's not her father. She doesn't necessarily want to be the hero who goes out there and saves the day. She might just want to have a normal life, and knowing that she can't have that is understandably upsetting for her. And I love that the show is bringing out the idea of talking to a therapist and getting help. More and more shows are being very proactive about talking about the importance of seeking out professional help, whether it's just the therapist or an actual psychologist or psychiatrist if it is a deeper issue. But there's nothing wrong with hiring a licensed professional to help you talk through your issues. Like, that's something that's so healthy and so normal, and we need to put more, or not put more, I guess we take away a lot of the negative stigmas that have been put on that type of thing in the past. Like, my parents' generation, if you saw a therapist, it automatically meant that you were crazy or weak. And that's just not true. Like, we have a lot of stuff to deal with as human beings, and having someone we can talk to who actually has been taught and went to school for helping you with mechanisms and different processes that will help you be better at that and just, live a better quality of life. That's just not a bad thing ever. So anyway, I'm really glad that the show has put a really healthy spotlight on that for Jen, and also kind of suggested it for Jefferson. And I really hope he does take it. Like, he kind of shrugged it off and they joked about it. Him and Lynn joked about it. But I do think Jefferson does need to talk about a lot of things. He's got a lot of PTSD going on. He needs to definitely talk about what happened with his father's death and witnessing something that traumatic. It definitely has shaped him in a certain way, but also it's what's formed this unhealthy obsession he has with taking down Tobias at all costs. So anyways, we'll see how that goes throughout the season. But outside of that, I'm not going to talk much about Khalil, because at this point it's pretty obvious he's recognizing that he's actually fully understanding that he made a deal with the devil, and he just has to deal with the repercussions of that. That's all there is to it. And Lala we have not seen yet. We had a reference to him in the 3rd episode, but we have not seen him, so I'm not sure if that means he's not coming back. But again, I have not watched the latest episode, which I'm going to actually react to very quickly. So far, he's a non-entity so far this season, which is interesting because they put a lot of effort into Lala in season 1. So I don't think he's gone, but how he'll play a part in season 2, I'm still not 100% sure, since it seems like Tobias is very much grooming Painkiller to be his right hand going forward. All in all, those are the kind of main points that I've been picking up about season 2. Oh, sorry, I should do a special shout out mention to the vice principal. I can't remember her name right now, the fellow spotter. She looks like they're grooming her to become an ally of circumstance for Black Lightning and the Pierce family crew. Clearly, it's not going to be a warm and fuzzy partnership in the beginning because of all the deception that she carried out while right underneath of Jefferson's nose, but her knowledge of the ASA, not to mention the fact that we saw she's a total badass, that can't be ignored. And I think that Gambi is definitely going to have a soft spot for her, because obviously they share a similar situation with being spotters and being used by the ASA to do some pretty horrible things that I think even she has some regrets about. So it'll be interesting to see how her dynamic ties in with everything throughout the season. I'm really hoping they don't kill her off too quickly. I didn't like her a lot last season, but she's kind of becoming a bit intriguing to me now, and I kind of want to know more about her story and whether or not she's redeemable this season. So that's basically it for my review of the first 3 episodes of Black Lightning. They have been really, really good, as I mentioned so far, but I didn't expect anything less from this show. The writing is always amazing. The acting, of course, is on point, and I love that they're slowly building this story to make it more layered and complex, and while doing all that, we're actually seeing development from all the characters, like the main characters. Like, we're seeing Jefferson going through some things, we're seeing Jen grow and evolve, we're seeing Anissa grow and evolve, we're seeing Lynn grow and evolve. So I really like that with shows that have an ensemble cast, actually taking the time to develop their characters and let them actually have their own kind of evolution as the seasons go on. So I hope they continue doing that, and I'm gonna keep watching. So Thanks so much for watching this along with me, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any comments, questions, please leave them below in the comments. You know, I like to read that and get in that conversation with you. And if you like this video, guys, please click like. And if you want to see more from this geeky face, please click subscribe. Until next time, see ya.